Pneumatica, Book 1, by Aaron Welborn and Aaron Knight.
In the room, all the lights were burned out but one, yellow and wilted, barely pushing away the shadows. The bottom end of the bed was propped up on cinder blocks to keep it somewhat level, and brown cigarette stains marked the plastic sink, toilet, and the edge of the tub. Theron quickly inspected the room, looking in the narrow closet, under the bed and behind the shower curtains. Satisfied, he sighed and stepped outside to stand under an incessant humming bug light, listening to the kamikaze popping as they went diving in. He produced a polished Zippo lighter, flicked the flint wheel, and pulled it up to an antique porcelain pipe between his lips. The slender pipe was disguised to look like a cigarette, and contained a rather aromatic strand of 420 he'd traded a talkative abuela out of the night before in Laredo. He watched as a truck of slurring, singing men sped by the inn, on down the road, only to be swallowed by the shadows and silence that preceded twilight. He thought of all the drunken men, cheap dates and lost souls that had found shelter and comfort in this insipid hole. Another night, another unfamiliar yet inviting bed just passing through. Exhausted but pleasantly buzzed, Theron tapped the cached remains of the pipe out into the wind and re-entered the room. Telisa had run a bath of surprisingly hot and clear water. They could have eaten for a week on what a hot bath would normally cost, but any way station outside a sanctioned city center was no doubt running with gray water purifiers and moisture collectors. Wastelanders always found ways to get by after all the water rights had been claimed and the aquifers diverted by the corporations. Theron bolted the door. He crossed the room and slumped down against the wall that separated the bedroom from the bath and sipped one of the warm beers that had been sitting in the trunk since Monterey. "Want me to wash your back?" he asked. Telisa smiled with weary eyes and lifted a steaming washcloth from the water. "I think I've got it covered." She squeezed the soaking cloth to languorously rinse the soap off her back. Water cascaded across the intricate knotwork tattoos on her shoulders and formed a halo of steamy alabaster around her torso as it met with the bathwater. She let her head sag, enjoying the pampering of the ritual. "Ready for tomorrow?" Theron asked from around the corner. She hesitated, listening to the water dripping from her body into the bath echoing off the tiled walls. It was not lost on her, this wall between them. "As ready as I'm going to be." She hesitated, processing. "The data we got is solid. They're planning something big this time." She paused as she ran the washcloth down the center of her spine. "Are the drones charged?" "Yeah, we should be able to get about a 5-hour flight out of them before they transmit. That should throw them off our trail, at least enough to make it to the outskirts of DFW before they figure out we skanked them." Theron tried to sound assured, but he wasn't. Telisa brought her knees up to her chest and her forehead lowered to touch them. Steam rising, water dripping, musty air cut with the fresh fragrance of homemade soap. She sat in silence for a moment more, enjoying the simple privilege of hot water against her skin. It had been too long since anything felt normal, and these stolen moments of quotidian ritual were all that kept her going other than inertia. "That last drop scared me, Theron. They got too close." Telisa paused, hoping that Theron would reassure her. She hadn't said anything about the incident in Guadalajara, but Theron knew she was afraid. They had barely escaped when their position had been triangulated, no doubt by some dedicated virtual intelligence agent that had a serious hate-on for them. The Hounds had been sent in. Monstrous, genetically altered beasts, shoulder height to an average-sized man, hardwired and controlled like drones from a shipping container 1,000 miles away. 2 of them were airdropped dead center of their broadcast beacon, and their area cam had caught the whole thing. The Hounds created small impact craters as they crashed into the earth. Completely undamaged, they launched themselves at the beacon with an alien ferocity that sent dread shuddering through Theron's gut as he watched from safety over 50 miles away. Whatever Telisa was saying was upsetting people that had resources and minds violent enough to silence her in ways that would strike terror into the hearts of anyone foolish or brave enough to consider picking up her torch. Telisa stared at the steamed tile wall in front of her, letting her voice echo into the adjoining room. "With the new tech, do you actually think we'll be safer now?" There were no words that would truly provide her comfort, but she had asked anyway. Theron thought of explaining how he'd plotted the destination of each transmission drone, and how he planned to drop the beacon an hour west of Las Cruces, then double back, and that the transmitter that he'd picked up from the clocksmith a few hours ago would block their signature from satellite surveillance. But he opted for a confident, "Yeah, I do," instead. Telisa laid back and sank down into the water, putting the newly soaked and steaming washcloth across her eyes. Theron left her there in a pool of half-formed thoughts and the residue of a dozen lonely and forgotten roads. He let himself fall back onto the springy, creaking bed, wishing it would swallow him whole, transporting him somewhere, anywhere. Any of this seemed like a faraway dream. He drifted off before he could even remove his boots.